She had just enough money to get home, just enough strength to keep moving forward. But when she saw a stranger kicked off the bus, lost, desperate, with not a single coin to his name, Isabella did something that no one else dared. She paid his fare with the last of her change. What she didn't know was that he was a millionaire, and what he did next would turn her quiet, unnoticed life into a tale everyone would whisper about. But what came after? Not even she was ready for it. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening to this moment from? Your support is what fuels these stories, one heart at a time. The air was thick with exhaust fumes and the scent of damp pavement. Isabella tugged her coat tighter as she stood beneath a flickering street lamp, waiting for the last bus home. Her legs ached after a long double shift at the diner. Her fingers were still pruny from scrubbing dishes, and her scalp itched under the bun she'd tied up hours ago in a hurry. It was nearing midnight. The streets were quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, only forgotten. She glanced down at her sneakers, the soles worn so thin she could feel the sidewalk beneath her feet. Next to her, an old woman clutched a plastic bag filled with groceries, and a couple argued softly at the end of the bench. Isabella tuned them out. Her thoughts were already drifting to tuition payments, her mother's medication, the dream of someday opening her own bakery. Someday, she whispered under her breath, as if speaking it aloud might make it more real. Meanwhile, miles across the city, Logan Stone was walking fast, too fast for someone in his shoes. His blazer was torn at the sleeve, and blood trickled down from a split in his knuckle. He wasn't used to walking, not really. Not in dress shoes, not in this part of town. The alley he'd taken as a shortcut had seemed safe enough, until it wasn't. Two shadows, a flash of silver, a fist. Gone were his wallet, phone, and watch. Gone was the illusion that he controlled everything. Now, under the dull orange glow of unfamiliar streetlights, Logan felt something strange in his chest. Not panic, something quieter, vulnerability. For the first time in years, he had no name to flash, no driver to call, no card to swipe. Just bruised ribs, a bleeding hand, and a silent city that didn't care who he was. Then, through the blur of adrenaline, he saw it. A bus stop. A way out. He jogged toward it, waving an arm as the bus rumbled to a halt. Relief flooded him as the doors hissed open. "Sir," the driver said flatly before Logan could speak. "Fare." "I don't have it," Logan admitted, still catching his breath. "I was robbed. My wallet. Everything's gone. I just need to get uptown. Please." The driver didn't blink. "No fare, no ride." Logan frowned. "Look, I'm not trying to get away with anything. I'll pay you double tomorrow, triple. Just back of the line, sir." A few passengers muttered behind him. Someone laughed. Logan stood frozen, mouth half open, pride and helplessness colliding inside him. This never happened to him, ever. Then a quiet voice from behind. "I'll pay." He turned. Isabella stepped forward, eyes low, cheeks flushed, and handed the driver a few coins. Not many, just enough. "She's good," the driver muttered, taking the money. Logan's mouth opened, but no words came. He was stunned, not just by the gesture, but by her. A girl in a faded uniform shirt, smelling faintly of vanilla and grease, who didn't look like she had anything to spare, had just given him her last bit of change. He followed her silently and sat down in the seat across from hers. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The bus wheezed forward, jolting as it merged back into traffic. The air inside was warm, stale. A baby cried softly a few rows back. "Thank you," he said, finally breaking the silence. She shrugged without looking at him. "You looked like you needed help." "I did." He leaned forward, trying to meet her eyes. "Still do." That made her smile faintly. "You don't look like someone who usually needs help." "I usually don't," he admitted. Her gaze shifted toward him, finally curious. There was something about him, his posture, his watch tan, the way he held himself, that didn't match this bus, this neighborhood. Something refined. She didn't ask questions, though, just folded her hands in her lap and turned her face back toward the window. The passing city lights danced across her skin. He watched her quietly, unsure why he felt so drawn in. Maybe it was the fatigue softening his usual defenses. Maybe it was the way she sat there, calm and steady, as if this world didn't faze her. Or maybe it was how, in just 10 seconds, she had reminded him of something he had forgotten existed. Kindness, without expectation. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated before replying. "Isabella." "Isabella," he repeated, like he was trying it on. A pause. Then he offered, "I'm Logan." She nodded. "Nice to meet you, Logan." Another silence, this one less awkward, almost comfortable. "You work nearby?" he asked, nodding to her uniform. "Diner, 3rd and Maple." She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. He nodded, filing the information away. "And you?" she asked, half smiling. "You don't exactly look like you're from around here." He hesitated. "Let's just say I made a wrong turn." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now." She studied him for a moment, then let it go. There was something in her that recognized pain, even when it wore expensive shoes. They rode in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the engine their only soundtrack. Outside, the city pulsed. Faint lights in windows, dogs barking behind fences, a couple kissing at a corner under a neon sign that buzzed like a memory. Isabella's eyes drifted shut for a moment. Logan watched her, strangely protective of her exhaustion. He didn't know her, not really, but in that moment, she felt more real than anyone he'd spoken to all month. "I should be getting off soon," she murmured, stirring. Logan leaned forward. "Can I repay you?" She shook her head. "No need." It was just a few coins. "But still," he insisted, "that was rare." She gave him a tired but warm look. "Just be kind to the next person who needs help. That's enough." He wanted to say more, ask for her number, her last name. Anything, but something held him back. Maybe it was the rawness of the night. Maybe it was respect, or fear that if he asked too much, he'd break whatever fragile thread had formed between them. The bus slowed to a stop. She stood, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Isabella," he said quickly, "will I see you again?" She looked over her shoulder, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. "Depends on whether you like pancakes." Then she stepped off the bus and into the night, vanishing into the halo of a broken streetlight. Logan sat frozen, watching the spot where she'd stood, where the door had closed. The bus rumbled on, but everything inside him had stopped moving. He didn't know her last name, didn't know where she lived, but he knew the diner on 3rd and Maple. And that was enough for now, because something inside him whispered, this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Logan had spent most of his adult life surrounded by people who spoke in rehearsed smiles and careful flattery. In boardrooms and ballrooms, everyone already knew who he was long before he introduced himself. They leaned in too close, laughed a second too long, studied his reaction to everything he said. He was used to it, conditioned even. But last night had shaken that entire reality loose. He couldn't sleep. He had returned to his penthouse around 1:30 a.m., driven by a cab driver who, unlike the bus driver, had recognized him and refused payment. "On the house, Mr. Stone," the man had said with a grin. Logan had nodded, thanked him, but part of him had felt hollow, because even in that gesture there was something expected, something transactional, but not with her. Isabella. She hadn't known his name, hadn't asked, hadn't tried to guess who he was or what he could do for her. She just gave, without question, without calculation. That thought echoed in him long after he lay in bed, the city lights painting pale blue lines across his ceiling. By morning, it was all he could think about. He replayed the bus ride in his mind like a scene from a movie. Her voice, the weariness in her eyes, the moment she'd looked back before stepping off into the dark. "Depends on whether you like pancakes." God, what a line. He wanted to see her again, not just out of gratitude, but because something about her had carved a space in his chest he didn't know was empty until she stepped into it, and he was determined to find her. Logan dressed down that morning, which for him meant a fitted navy jacket, dark jeans, and boots that didn't scream billionaire. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, left his Rolex in the drawer, and pulled out an old leather wallet with only some cash and an ID, just in case. "Marcus," he called as he entered the lobby of his building. The doorman looked up, surprised. "Mr. Stone, you're up early." "I need a favor," Logan said, lowering his voice. "I need to find a diner." Marcus tilted his head. "Any diner?" "No, a specific one, 3rd and Maple. Do you know it?" The older man grinned. "You're not exactly the pancakes at a booth type, sir." Logan smirked. "I might be becoming one." Marcus chuckled. "I know the place. Small spot. Family run. Been there for years." "You want a car?" "No, I'll take the subway." Marcus blinked. "You? Don't look so shocked." "I'm just pleasantly surprised." Logan laughed and gave him a nod. "Thanks, Marcus." The subway ride was crowded and smelled like metal and too much cologne. Logan stood near the door, gripping the pole and watching people with a new kind of curiosity. There was a girl doing math homework on her phone, a nurse asleep against the window, a boy with a violin case tapping his foot to music no one else could hear. None of them knew him. None of them cared who he was. And strangely, he liked it. When he emerged above ground, the sky was a soft grey. The streets here were narrower, quieter. A few local stores lined the block, bodegas, laundromats, a bakery with smudged glass. Then, at the corner, he saw it. Marcy's Diner. The name was fading on the sign, and the awning had a tear in it, but the smell wafting from inside was magic. Coffee, syrup, and fresh toast. He pushed the door open. A bell chimed above his head. Inside, the place was modest but clean. Vinyl booths, chrome bar stools, a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in years. A waitress with tired eyes and a ponytail carried a plate of scrambled eggs to a corner table. And there, behind the counter, was her, Isabella, wearing the same blue uniform shirt, her hair tied back, a pencil behind her ear. She was scribbling something on a notepad, unaware that the man she'd helped was now standing in the doorway, heart thudding like he was 17 again. He took a deep breath and approached. She looked up as he reached the counter. Recognition dawned in her eyes, and a soft smile touched her lips. "Well," she said, "you didn't get lost." "I like pancakes," he said, smiling back. She laughed quietly. "So you remembered?" "I remembered everything." He sat at the counter. She placed a laminated menu in front of him, though he didn't open it. "Coffee?" she offered. "Please." She poured him a cup and leaned on the counter. "So, what's your story, Logan?" He lifted his eyes to hers. "It's complicated." "I have time." He hesitated. "I told you I was mugged last night, that's true. But what I didn't say is, I don't usually take the bus, ever." She smiled knowingly. "I figured." He exhaled. "I come from a different world than this one. One where people don't give anything without expecting something back. What you did, I don't think I've ever experienced that before." She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "Maybe that's why it mattered." He nodded slowly. "Maybe." Isabella was called to another table, but Logan didn't mind waiting. He watched her move through the diner with grace, wiping tables, refilling mugs, laughing with the old man at the window booth. She was radiant, not in a polished magazine cover way, but in the kind of way that made everything around her seem more grounded. When she returned, she leaned on the counter again. "So, what do you do? For work?" "I'm in hotels," he said carefully. "Operations. Strategy." She raised an eyebrow. "Fancy." "A bit." She didn't press, and that only made him like her more. "You ever stay in one of those luxury places?" he asked. She shook her head. "Never had a reason to. I like small places. Cozy. Real." He smiled. "Me too." And he meant it, for the first time. A customer at the other end called for a check. Isabella excused herself again. Logan looked down at his coffee, then back at her. A thought struck him. What if he just kept coming back here? What if he didn't explain everything right away? What if, for once, he let someone see the man, not the name? He scribbled something on a napkin and left it by his empty cup. When Isabella returned minutes later, he was gone. She frowned slightly, then saw the napkin. A small drawing of a pancake stack, below it his number, and 2 words. "See you soon." Her smile lingered for the rest of her shift. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew yet, was that their next meeting would change everything they thought they understood about love and trust. The next morning, Isabella arrived at the diner 15 minutes early, something she rarely did. But something felt different, as if the rhythm of her usual life had been interrupted, softly, quietly, by a stranger with tired eyes and a voice that didn't match his bruises. She hadn't expected to see Logan again, not really. Kindness was rarely returned, and her world didn't run on fairy tales or serendipity. But the napkin, folded carefully, tucked beside her coffee machine, had changed something. The little sketch. The number. "See you soon." It made her wonder if she'd imagined the warmth behind it. By 9:30 a.m., the diner was buzzing. The smell of fried bacon and maple syrup clung to the air like perfume. The radio crackled an old Frank Sinatra tune as Isabella filled mugs and greeted regulars by name. But part of her, just a small silent part, kept glancing at the door. And then he walked in. Same tousled hair, same quiet presence. But now he wore something else. Comfort, maybe. A sense of belonging. Like this place, this diner, had become familiar. Their eyes met before he even reached the counter. No dramatic pause, no stuttered words, just a look. And in it, something unspoken. "I'm here. I meant it." She gave a half smile. "You again." Logan took the stool closest to her. "Couldn't stop thinking about the pancakes." She poured his coffee. "You didn't even order them last time." "Maybe today's the day." She slid a menu toward him. "Or maybe you're just here for the company." He met her gaze. "Maybe I am." A beat passed, thick with that strange electric quiet that lives between two people who don't know each other well but already feel safe. "So," she said, pouring more coffee into another customer's cup, "you found your way back. No mugging this time?" "Nope." "Survived the subway. Even smiled at a baby." She laughed. "Look at you, becoming a local." "I'm adapting." He ordered a plate of pancakes and eggs, and while he waited they talked about harmless things. Music. How terrible the coffee was here. The weather. Nothing deep. But in the quiet pauses, in the way they watched each other when the other looked away, something else was growing. When his food arrived, Isabella moved to other tables, letting him eat in peace. But Logan didn't come just for breakfast. He wanted to learn her, not just her schedule or her story, but the details that built her, how she rubbed her neck when she was tired, how she bit her bottom lip when concentrating, how she smiled to herself after making a child laugh. He stayed for almost an hour. Before leaving, he left cash on the counter, too much again, and another note, folded beneath his receipt. "Same time tomorrow?" She read it after he walked out the door, smiled, but didn't answer. Yet the next day he came again, and the next and the next. Days turned into a rhythm neither of them had asked for, but neither wanted to break. Logan never pushed, never pried. He asked about her favorite books, her dream vacation, her coffee order. He told her about cities he'd visited, always vaguely, always leaving out the suite numbers and gala invitations. It was the first time he could be just Logan, not Logan Stone. And that, somehow, felt like freedom. Isabella, too, felt herself opening in small ways. She told him about her mother, about the accident that forced her to leave college early, about how baking helped her cope with anxiety. She shared her dream of opening a bakery by the sea, where people would come not just for bread but for comfort, a place that smelled like hope. Logan listened like her words mattered, like they weren't just stories, but truths that deserved space. One morning, as she wiped the counter and he stirred his coffee, she said, "You're a strange kind of customer." He looked up. "Because I tip too much?" "No," she smiled. "Because you keep showing up. And you keep letting me." "Touché." A pause. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why keep coming back?" He set his spoon down, met her eyes. "Because this place, you, remind me that not everything has to be bought to be real." Isabella looked at him for a long time. "You say things like that a lot. Is that bad?" "It's unexpected. Would it be okay if I kept doing it?" She looked down, suddenly shy. Maybe. Neither of them noticed that her co-worker, Tanya, was watching from behind the counter with raised eyebrows and a smirk. Nor did they see the elderly couple in the back whispering about how the new guy was clearly smitten. But whispers didn't matter, because something real was unfolding, slowly, carefully, like dough rising before dawn. One night after her shift, Isabella stepped outside to find Logan waiting near the bus stop. "I thought you'd be gone by now," she said, surprised. "I was hoping I could walk you home." She hesitated. "I'll stay on the sidewalk," he added quickly. "Scout's honor." She laughed. "You don't look like you were ever a scout." "I wasn't. But I do have good intentions." So they walked, past dimly lit streets and graffiti-tagged fences, past closed shops and barking dogs. She told him about the neighborhood. He told her about a childhood summer where he tried to build a lemonade stand, but gave the drinks away for free. "It didn't go well," he admitted. "You've always been bad at money." "Ironic, right?" She laughed, and he felt it in his chest. At her doorstep they lingered. "You never ask for anything," she said quietly. "Neither do you." "You could." "So could you." He stepped back, respectful. "Good night, Isabella." "Good night, Logan." She watched him walk away under the soft halo of a streetlight, and something in her pulsed. Hope, maybe. Or danger. Because men like him didn't usually walk into her world, and if they did, they never stayed. But Logan did. The next morning, he was at the diner again. Same stool, same smile, but something felt different. He didn't order food, just coffee, just her. And as he leaned forward, voice low, he asked, "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" She nodded, heart suddenly loud in her chest. "I think I look forward to this, to you, more than I've looked forward to anything in a long time." And just like that, the air changed. But before she could answer, a familiar voice crackled on the diner's old TV. It was the morning news. Logan Stone, heir to the Stone Resorts empire. Her head turned sharply. There he was, on screen. A polished version of the man who'd been sitting across from her for days. In a tuxedo, shaking hands at a gala, laughing with someone in a suit. She looked at him. He froze. The silence between them was deafening. Isabella's voice came out low. "You lied." And for the first time since the night they met, Logan had nothing to say. For the next several days, Logan kept coming back, despite the early hour, despite the curious glances from the regulars, despite the whisper in the back of his mind that warned him he was slipping deeper into something he couldn't control. Isabella never said much when he arrived. She didn't have to. Their connection didn't rely on declarations or labels. It built itself quietly, like steam rising from a cup of coffee, like the rhythm of shoes on linoleum, like the quiet brush of hands when one passed the sugar to the other. There was comfort in their routine. Logan would take the third stool at the counter, just left of the napkin dispenser. Isabella would greet him with a tired smile that somehow always reached her eyes. He'd order the same thing, coffee, sometimes pancakes, sometimes not. She'd pour, refill, and lean slightly over the counter when things were slow. That's when they'd talk. But not always. Some mornings words felt too heavy for the hour. On those days, they sat in silence, sipping their drinks while Sinatra hummed in the background. It wasn't awkward. It was grounding. One particular Tuesday morning, rain tapped against the diner windows like impatient fingers. Logan arrived drenched, his jacket clinging to him, and his hair damp enough to curl at the edges. Isabella stifled a smile. "You ever heard of umbrellas?" she asked, handing him a clean towel from behind the counter. "I'm more of a live, dangerously kind of guy," he replied, drying his face. She poured his coffee. "Dangerous guys usually come with leather jackets. You come with expensive cologne." "I'm redefining the type," he said, and her laugh, the soft kind, the kind she couldn't help, made something in him melt. She wasn't like anyone he knew. There was no performance with her, no filtered version of herself. She was raw and unpolished and utterly transparent. She didn't hide her frustration when the coffee machine hissed wrong. She didn't pretend not to be exhausted, and she never smiled unless she meant it. That morning, as thunder rolled distantly outside, they spoke about dreams again. "I always wanted to live by the ocean," she said, wiping down a counter that didn't need cleaning. Some place where I could wake up and smell salt instead of smog. He sipped his drink. With your own bakery? Yeah, she nodded. Big windows, white curtains, wooden shelves lined with fresh bread and cinnamon rolls. He smiled at the detail. Sounds peaceful. It would be. Her voice softened. And quiet. My mum could live with me. Maybe plant something. She used to garden before the accident. Logan nodded, sensing the pain beneath her tone but not pressing. You're going to get there. She looked up. How can you be so sure? He leaned in. Because people like you don't stop. She looked at him longer than usual after that, but what neither of them said, what pulsed quietly under their conversations, was that they were beginning to need these mornings, the coffee, the laughter, the softness between moments. It wasn't just routine anymore, it was the routine, and anything that came after it felt dull in comparison. Isabella began to notice things, like how Logan always rolled the paper sleeve of his coffee cup halfway down, or how he hummed under his breath when reading a text, or how he glanced at her every time she laughed with someone else. He noticed things too, like how her lips twitched when she was trying not to smile, or how she leaned ever so slightly toward him when they talked, or how his chest felt tighter when her shift ended and she walked away. One afternoon, just before closing, Logan surprised her with something. She was wiping tables, already changed into her street clothes, a faded hoodie and black jeans, when he walked in holding a brown paper bag. What's this? She asked, eyebrows lifted. I passed a bakery on the east side, he said. Thought you might want to critique the competition. Inside the bag were 3 pastries, a chocolate croissant, a lemon tart, and something she immediately identified as trying too hard. She laughed. Wow, I'm impressed. By the pastries. By your boldness. Bringing a baker fake sweets. Dangerous. He leaned on the counter, grinning. I like living on the edge, remember? They sat in one of the empty booths as she tasted each one, offering her review with exaggerated seriousness. This one's dry, like dessert-level dry. Noted. This one's pretending to be lemon but tastes like regret. Ouch. This one, she said, taking another bite, is actually good. Almost too good. So I earned points? You earned a neutral expression. Progress, he murmured. As they laughed, a slow warmth grew between them. It wasn't passion, not yet, but something deeper. The kind of warmth that whispered, I see you, and even louder. I want to see more. That night, Logan couldn't sleep again. He stared at the city skyline, wondering what the hell he was doing. He'd built his life on control, on timing, on calculated decisions. And here he was, riding buses, eating in diners, waking up early just to see someone who didn't even know who he was. He hadn't told her the truth. Not yet. Every time he came close, fear held him back. Not of being judged, but of ruining what they had. What if knowing changed everything? What if her kindness had been for him, not the stone part? But secrets had weight, and his was growing heavier by the day. The following morning, he arrived early. Too early. The diner was still setting up. Isabella blinked when she saw him. You okay? She asked. Yeah. He exhaled. Just couldn't wait. She tilted her head, curious. To see me. Yes. And that word, simple, quiet, left no room for games. They stood there, close, but not touching. I feel like I'm on the edge of something, she whispered. He nodded. Me too. The silence stretched. But then, life, as always, intervened. The door burst open, and Tanya, the other waitress, rushed in, holding her phone. Isabella, you might want to see this. Confused, Isabella took the phone and froze. On the screen, a social media video of Logan, or rather, Logan Stone, smiling, speaking at a hotel gala. The caption, Future CEO of Stone Resorts makes surprise speech at charity event. Isabella blinked, looked up. Logan's face was pale. He didn't deny it, didn't speak, didn't move, just watched as the light in her eyes dimmed. You lied to me, she said quietly. It's not what you think, he began, but her expression cut him off. How long were you going to pretend? I wasn't pretending. Yes, you were, she snapped, stepping back. You let me believe you were like me. I am like you, Isabella. She shook her head. No, you just liked being near me because it made you feel different. Real. But you're not. You're from a world that doesn't touch mine. Logan took a step forward. That's not true. Then why didn't you tell me? He hesitated. And that was all she needed. She tossed the towel she'd been holding onto the counter. Please leave. Isabella, go. The room felt colder as he walked out. The door shut softly behind him, but the silence it left was loud. Isabella stood still, staring at the counter where he always sat, where she had begun to believe in something impossible. But now, everything felt like a lie, and for the first time in days, she didn't want to come back tomorrow. Logan had never felt so out of place in his own life. The penthouse, once a symbol of his success, now felt cold, sterile. The minimalist furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the priceless art on the walls. It all seemed like a museum exhibit curated for someone he no longer wanted to be. Isabella's words echoed in his head, over and over, like a song stuck on the wrong line. You let me believe you were like me. He hadn't meant to lie. Not really. But a mission, he was learning, could be its own kind of betrayal. He hadn't gone back to the diner, not the next day, not the day after that. He couldn't bear the thought of seeing her look at him like that again, like he was just another rich man pretending to understand a life he'd never lived. And yet, every morning, his body still woke early, still waited by the door, still listened for the sound of her laugh in a memory that was now too painful to revisit. But Logan wasn't the kind of man who ran forever. Eventually, silence became heavier than confrontation, and so, on a Thursday morning, he found himself standing outside the diner, hands in his coat pockets, heart somewhere in his throat. He didn't go in. He watched. Through the window he saw her, Isabella, pouring coffee, nodding as someone spoke, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She looked fine, maybe tired, maybe a little quieter, but not broken, not like he was. It hurt more than he expected. He turned away, but he didn't walk far. Instead, he crossed the street to a bench and sat down, ordering a black coffee from the cart on the corner. He stayed there for over an hour, hoping, foolishly, that she might glance out and see him, that she might come outside, that something might shift. She never looked up. Inside the diner, Isabella had noticed him the moment he appeared on the sidewalk. She pretended not to, but her hand trembled slightly when she poured the creamer. Her co-worker Tanya gave her a look but didn't say anything. Isabella didn't know what she felt. Anger, disappointment, grief, or maybe something worse, hope. Because if she still hoped he would explain himself, it meant she wasn't done caring, and that terrified her. By the time she finished her shift, he was gone. The bench was empty, the sidewalk clean, but the place he'd occupied remained etched into her vision. That night, Isabella walked home slower than usual. The streets seemed louder, the air colder. When she reached her building, she hesitated at the entrance, then turned around. The walk to the Stone Grand Hotel took 22 minutes. She'd Googled it days ago, out of curiosity, out of fury, out of the need to understand how far apart their worlds really were. Now, she stood in front of its massive glass doors, unsure if she belonged. The lobby was immaculate, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. A grand piano played itself in the corner. The scent of fresh orchids lingered in the air, delicate and distant. She walked to the front desk. "I'm here to see Logan Stone," she said, her voice steady. The receptionist blinked, surprised, then smiled politely. "One moment." Minutes later, Logan stepped into the lobby, clearly caught off guard. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie slightly loosened. He looked like he hadn't slept well in days. "Isabella." She didn't respond to his name. "Why didn't you come in?" she asked. "I didn't think I had the right." "I gave you the right," she said sharply, "and you threw it away." "I didn't know how to explain," he admitted. "Every time I tried, it felt like I was choosing between being honest and losing you, or pretending and getting a few more days." She crossed her arms. "So you chose pretending. I chose not to scare you away. That wasn't your choice to make. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't care about your money, she continued. Still don't. But I cared about the truth, about being seen, and I thought... Her voice faltered for a second. I thought I was. You were, he said immediately, stepping closer. God, Isabella. You were the only thing in my life that ever felt real. She blinked, and in that split second, he saw the softness in her eyes that hadn't fully hardened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded, worn. I wrote this the night you found out. I didn't send it. I wasn't sure if I had the right anymore. She took it, unfolded it, read in silence. It wasn't long, just a few lines. I was a stranger on a bus, and you gave me something no one has in years, grace. I lied, not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't trust that I was worthy of someone like you seeing all of me and staying. But I want to be the man who deserves your truth. I'm not him yet, but I will be. Isabella folded the paper slowly. That's the version of you I wanted to know, she said quietly. Not the one who hides behind charm and money, the one who's scared, the one who doubts, the one who fights to be better. He nodded. So be him, she said, handing back the note. But don't come looking for me until you're not afraid to be all of it. She turned to leave. Logan didn't stop her, because deep down, he knew she was right. In the following days, Logan withdrew from everything. He postponed meetings, declined invitations, cancelled a trip to London. Instead, he dove into the parts of his world he had always ignored, the fine print, the contracts, the consequences, and most of all, the legacy his father had built without ever once asking what Logan wanted. The truth was, he didn't want to run stone resorts anymore. He wanted something that felt human, something he could build, not just inherit. And that clarity, painful as it was, became the first brick in a different kind of foundation. One evening, after a long conversation with his board of directors, and an even longer silence with himself, Logan made a decision. He would step down, not immediately, but soon. He would walk away from the empire and begin again. Meanwhile, Isabella returned to her life, shift after shift, table after table. Life didn't pause just because hearts cracked open. But she felt different now. Not because of what Logan had or didn't have, but because of what she had almost begun to believe, that maybe she was worthy of something good, that maybe someone could see her, really see her, and still choose to stay. And that possibility, once awakened, didn't go back to sleep so easily, especially when one morning, as she wiped the front windows before opening, a headline on a newspaper stand caught her eye. Logan Stone to leave Stone Resorts, cites desire to build something real. She froze, read it twice. Then, slowly, quietly, she smiled, and for the first time in days, her hands stopped shaking. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something real. Saturday mornings were usually slow at the diner, a soft kind of slow, the kind that smelled like fresh toast and sounded like quiet conversations over shared breakfasts. The regulars came in later than usual, wearing sweatpants and sleepy eyes. Isabella liked that rhythm. It gave her time to breathe, to refill the salt shakers, to pretend that the ache in her chest had faded completely. She had managed to avoid thinking about Logan for the most part. It helped that he hadn't shown up. It helped even more that she hadn't let herself read the article more than once. Still, the words had stayed with her. Desire to build something real. They echoed sometimes in the space between one order and the next, in the back room while she folded napkins, in the silence of her walk home. But she refused to give them power. People said things all the time. Words were easy. Change was not. She had heard too many apologies in her life to trust one delivered through a headline. That morning, she was taking a short break in the back of the diner when Tanya poked her head in, eyes wide. "You might want to see this," she whispered. Isabella looked up, confused. "What?" Tanya just pointed toward the front. Curious, and with a growing knot in her stomach, Isabella stepped out from behind the swinging door. The small TV mounted above the counter was playing the weekend news. Normally it was just background noise. but now every customer in the diner had their head turned toward the screen. A live broadcast, some kind of press conference, and there he was. Logan, standing at a podium with a skyline behind him, wearing a charcoal grey suit, speaking into a cluster of microphones. Calm, poised, familiar. Isabella froze. A customer turned to her. "Isn't that the guy who—" She didn't answer. The volume on the TV rose. Effective immediately, I've chosen to step away from my role at Stone Resorts. Not because of scandal, not because of failure, but because of something deeper. Because success without meaning is just noise. And I want silence. I want something real. Cameras flashed. Journalists leaned forward. Logan continued. I met someone recently. Someone who reminded me that authenticity can't be bought and that connection doesn't care about last names or net worth. She didn't know who I was when she met me, and I didn't tell her. That was my mistake. The knot in Isabella's stomach tightened. She taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, it's power. And I owe her more than I can explain. I owe her truth. So here it is. He looked straight into the camera. I'm Logan Stone, and I'm no longer hiding. The broadcast ended. Silence swept through the diner. Someone clapped slowly. Another whispered, "Wow." Isabella stood still, not blinking, not breathing. It wasn't the speech that broke her. It was the realization that the entire city now knew her story, their story. The quiet thing they'd built in the shadows had been dragged into the light, without her consent. And now it didn't feel like hers anymore. She turned wordless and walked back into the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she leaned against the counter. He had meant well. She could feel that. The words weren't empty, but they were public, loud, and she wasn't ready for loud. What they had was sacred, small, unfinished, and now it was exposed. Later that day, as she left her shift, she found a letter tucked inside her coat pocket. The handwriting was familiar. Isabella, I didn't tell you because I was ashamed, not of who I am, but of how often I've let that identity define me. When I met you, I felt invisible in a way that was beautiful, free. I didn't want to lose that, but I lost something else instead, your trust. You once told me that you didn't want someone who made promises they couldn't keep, so I won't promise you anything now, except this. I am changing, not for you, not for show, for me. Because for the first time, I know what I want to build. And it started the moment you paid for my bus fare. Logan. She folded the letter, pressed it to her chest. But still, she didn't know what to do. Because love, real love, wasn't always about big gestures or public declarations. Sometimes it was about sitting across from someone in silence, trusting that they meant what they hadn't yet found the words to say. And now, those moments felt so far away. A week passed. Logan kept his distance. He didn't visit the diner, didn't call, didn't send more letters. Isabella thought it would make her feel safe again, grounded. But instead it made everything feel unfinished. One night, after a particularly long shift, she sat at her kitchen table and pulled out a sheet of paper. She didn't plan to write him, she just wanted to get it out. But the words came anyway. You hurt me by hiding. You surprised me by changing. But what scares me most is how much I still want to believe in you. She didn't sign it. She didn't send it. But the next morning she folded it neatly and slipped it into her pocket. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end yet. The lobby of the Stone Grand Hotel looked the same as the last time Isabella had walked through it. Immaculate, quiet, like time itself moved more slowly there. But this time her heart beat louder than her footsteps. She had spent the last 3 days thinking about the speech, about the letter, about the way her name hadn't been spoken aloud, but somehow the entire city had begun whispering her story. And still Logan hadn't reached out. That hurt more than she admitted. So she came to him, not for closure, but for clarity. The receptionist greeted her like she knew who she was. That alone made Isabella's stomach turn. I'm here to see Logan Stone, she said, more firmly than she felt. One moment, Miss Isabella. Just Isabella. The woman smiled and nodded. Minutes later, Logan appeared at the far end of the lobby, walking slowly toward her. He was in jeans and a dark sweater this time, no tie, no polish, just him. But she saw it in his eyes the moment he saw her. Guilt. Hope. Something heavier. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." They stood like that for a moment. Two people who had shared silence in a bus, laughter over coffee, and now, this. He gestured gently toward a hallway. "Can we talk somewhere quieter?" She nodded. They ended up in a small lounge tucked behind the main atrium. Soft chairs, dim lighting, no one else around. He waited for her to speak first. She didn't. So he started. "I didn't expect to see you. I didn't expect you to give a press conference about me," she said, voice even. "I never said your name." "But you said enough." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't do it for them. I did it because I was tired of hiding, of pretending. That speech, it was about owning my choices, and you were one of them." "You don't get to say that like it's noble," she replied. "You said you wanted something real, Logan, but what we had was real, until you used it to rewrite your own story." He looked at her, wounded. "That wasn't my intention, but that's what you did." He sat down on the edge of a chair, elbows on his knees. "I didn't know how else to show you that I was serious, that I was willing to give it all up. Giving it all up is easy when you still have a net beneath you," she said. Silence stretched between them like glass. She walked slowly toward the window, arms crossed. "You say you want something real, but real isn't glamorous. It's waking up exhausted. It's worrying if you have enough bus fare. It's pouring coffee for people who don't remember your name. You wanted to touch that world, Logan, but only with one hand." He stood. "That's not fair, isn't it?" He stepped closer. "You think I don't know discomfort. You think I haven't fought for anything. My father didn't hand me this life wrapped in a bow. I've had to earn every scrap of respect in a world that only sees last names and legacy." "But you still had the choice," she said sharply. "You chose when to hide and when to reveal. I never had that luxury." He went quiet. She turned to face him fully. "I needed you to see me, all of me, but you only saw what made you feel better about yourself." "That's not true," he said, voice low. "I saw everything. I saw your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I saw the way you carry your mother's pain on your shoulders and still show up for the world. I saw the dreamer who talks about cinnamon rolls like they're sacred, and I fell in love with all of it." She blinked. "Don't say that. It's the truth. You don't get to say it now." "I have to say it now," he said, stepping closer, "because I won't pretend anymore. I love you, Isabella. I don't care if that's inconvenient or if it's too late. I needed you to know." She looked away, fighting the storm behind her eyes. "And what do you want from me?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. "I want a second chance," he said finally. "But not right now. Not if you're not ready. I just want you to know that I'm not going back. I'm not running. I'm starting something new. And I want it to be with you. Someday." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. She nodded slowly. "I don't hate you," she said, "but I don't trust you yet." "I can live with that," he said, "as long as it's yet." They stood in silence again. Then, slowly, Isabella reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, the one she had written at her kitchen table. She handed it to him. "I wasn't going to give this to you," she said, "but I think you should read it." He unfolded it. "You hurt me by hiding. You surprised me by changing. But what scares me most is how much I still want to believe in you." He looked up, eyes full. She stepped back. "I'm not promising anything," she said softly, "but I haven't stopped thinking about you either." Then she turned and walked away. Logan didn't follow. He just stood there holding the note like it was made of glass. Because now, there was something worth waiting for again. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Logan's apartment, but he didn't see it. He sat at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, her note in his hands. The ink was slightly smudged in the corner, maybe from her fingers, maybe from a tear she didn't wipe. He had read it at least 30 times, and still, every word sank deeper. "You hurt me by hiding. You surprised me by changing, but what scares me most is how much I still want to believe in you." There was no anger in the letter, no blame, just truth. And that truth undid him. He had always believed power came from control, from building empires, negotiating contracts, keeping his emotions tucked behind a polished smile. But Isabella had made him realize something he hadn't wanted to admit. He didn't know who he was outside of that world, until now. Because for the first time he wanted a life that wasn't measured in acquisitions or accolades. He wanted realness, real mornings, real conversations, real risk. He wanted to build something with his hands. Something imperfect and small and alive, something like her dream. A hotel by the ocean, a bakery with fresh bread, a place that smelled like cinnamon and second chances. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to choose it. On the other side of the city, Isabella walked through the community garden where her mother used to bring her as a child. It was barely a patch of green among concrete, but it was enough. Roses grew unevenly along the fence. There was a wooden bench under a fig tree that leaned like it was tired of standing straight. She sat there, jacket tight around her. The letter Logan had read was no longer with her, but the words lived in her chest. She hadn't gone to the diner that day. Tanya had covered her shift. She needed space to think, and this place, this hidden, ordinary corner of the world, was the only one that didn't demand anything from her. She looked at her phone. No new messages, no calls. She wasn't sure if she felt relieved or disappointed. The truth was she missed him, but she also missed herself, before him, before she started doubting whether her dreams were naive, before she began wondering if the ache in her chest was love or just the echo of something unfinished. She closed her eyes and whispered into the wind, "What do I do now?" The garden didn't answer, but something inside her stirred, a quiet knowing. You don't run. You build. Logan met with his lawyers the following day. "I'm not changing my mind," he said firmly. "I want to dissolve my inheritance clause. Let the board appoint someone else." His lawyer, a man who had watched Logan grow from a college intern into the shadow of his father, frowned. "This is everything your family worked for, and none of it feels like mine. You understand this means walking away from billions, right?" Logan nodded. "I'd rather build something I love with nothing than inherit something I hate with everything." A pause. The lawyer folded his hands. "And what will you build?" "A small hotel," Logan said, "by the ocean, maybe with a bakery inside." The man blinked. "That's oddly specific." Logan smiled. "It has to be." He left the meeting lighter than he'd felt in months, not because it was easy, but because it was right. He drove straight to the coast that afternoon, to a sleepy seaside town where he used to vacation with his mother before the weight of boardrooms replaced the weight of sand between his toes. He walked along a stretch of abandoned property facing the shore. Wind tugged at his coat. Gulls cried above him. The sea whispered against the rocks like it was holding secrets, and in his mind, he could see it. Wooden beams, sunlight through open windows, tables with flowers in the center, a small bakery counter, her name on the sign. Not his name. Hers. He took out his phone, dialed the number. Isabella answered on the third ring. She didn't speak first, so he did. "I found it," he said. "The place?" Her heart picked up. "Where?" "3 blocks from the beach, south-facing. You can smell salt through the windows." She didn't answer. "I want to build it," he said, "but only if you do it with me. I don't want to be your decoration, Logan. You'd be my partner. I don't want your money. You'd bring your recipes, your vision. I'd bring my hands, my time." She paused. "Why now?" "Because I don't want to fix what was. I want to build what could be, from scratch, with you." Silence again. Then, "I'll come see it." She arrived 3 days later. The property was weathered, overgrown. The paint peeled. The roof sagged on one side. But the view was endless. And when Isabella stepped onto the porch and saw Logan standing there with a thermos of cheap coffee and a folder full of sketches, something inside her softened. "This isn't a hotel yet," she said. "No, but it could be." She walked inside. The floor creaked. The walls smelled like dust. But the light was perfect. She turned slowly, taking it all in, then looked at him. "Okay," she said. He blinked. Okay? She smiled faintly. We do this on my terms. He nodded. Completely. And the bakery will be yours. And if we fight, we'll keep building anyway. She held his gaze for a long time, then whispered, then let's build. That night, they sat on the porch in silence, watching the moon rise over the waves. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Because sometimes love starts not with a promise, but with a choice. The ocean wind smelled of salt and something softer. Maybe the promise of change. The house sat quietly on the edge of the small cliffside road, weathered, tired, but still standing. Like them. It had been 3 weeks since Isabella said yes, not to love, not to Logan, but to the dream. And that yes had changed everything. They didn't move fast, didn't pretend the past hadn't left bruises, but they showed up every day, with paint-streaked hands and dirt under their nails, with arguments about color palettes and laughter over broken tiles, with sweat and silence and slowly rebuilding trust, one plank at a time. The bakery had taken form first. Logan insisted it be hers. Isabella insisted he stop buying everything without asking. They argued, then compromised. She chose the name La Dolce Vita. He carved the sign himself. They hung it together. Sometimes in the quiet of sanding wood or sweeping sawdust, their hands would brush. Neither pulled away, but neither rushed forward. Their rhythm was a delicate dance of remembering and relearning. And yet, something was different now. The Logan who showed up every morning in a hoodie and work boots was not the man who once walked into her diner wearing polished charm. He had calluses now, sunburned cheeks, a notebook filled with hand-drawn blueprints and terrible coffee stains. And Isabella, she laughed more. She let herself rest. She stopped shrinking to make room for someone else's ego. They still lived separately for now. Logan in a nearby rental, Isabella in the upstairs bedroom above the bakery. But they spent their days side by side. And at night, when the moon rose high and the ocean whispered beneath them, they'd sit on the front steps, shoulders nearly touching, the space between them humming with something unspoken. One such night, the power had gone out in the whole town. It was just them, 2 candles, and a half-baked tray of croissants cooling by the window. Isabella sighed. We're not ready for guests. Not yet, Logan agreed, stretching out his legs. But soon. She turned to look at him. You really gave it all up. He nodded. The board took it better than I thought. And your family? He hesitated. My mother cried, said she hadn't seen me this alive in years. My father, he exhaled. He didn't say anything. Just shook my hand. That was enough. She studied his profile. The new lines of exhaustion. The softness that now lingered in his voice. Do you regret it? No, he said immediately, then paused. But I do miss the coffee machine in my old office. She laughed. You mean the one with 5 buttons and gold trim? And 2 settings for foam? Ridiculous, she smiled. He turned to her then. Really turned. Can I tell you something? She nodded. I never felt more seen than I did the day you gave me bus fare. Her chest tightened. And I've never wanted to be more honest than I do with you. Every day. Even now. Especially now. She was quiet for a long time then. I haven't kissed anyone since you. He blinked. She looked down at her lap. Not because I was waiting, but because I didn't want to kiss someone just to forget you. Logan reached out, gently turning her face back toward his. I didn't want to forget either, he said. I wanted to earn the right to remember. And then, slowly, he leaned in. Their lips met, not in desperation or apology, but in something deeper, recognition. A homecoming, the kind of kiss that said, I see you, I still choose you, I'm not going anywhere. When they pulled apart, neither spoke for a long time. There was no need. The grand opening happened 1 month later. The hotel still smelled faintly of paint and new fabric. The rooms were simple, clean, warm, nothing extravagant. No champagne fountains or gold fixtures, just white sheets, wooden floors, and the sound of waves through open windows. But the bakery was perfect. La Dolce Vita opened at 6 a.m. sharp, with the scent of cinnamon and butter curling through the front doors. Locals came in sleepy-eyed and left smiling. Tourists took photos by the window. Children pressed their noses against the glass. Isabella wore a white apron with flour on her cheek. Logan worked the register badly and always gave too much change. Tanya, who had moved from the diner to help, ran the espresso machine like a drill sergeant. They laughed, they fought, they thrived. One evening, after they'd closed up and cleaned every corner, Logan locked the front door and turned to Isabella. "Come with me." "Where?" "Just trust me." She followed him down to the beach. The sand was cold under her bare feet. The stars burned quietly above them. He stopped near the edge of the tide, pulled something from his pocket. It wasn't a ring, it was a small, folded napkin, the same kind she used to serve coffee with. He opened it. Inside, written in his handwriting, "See you soon." She smiled, remembering. He pulled out a second napkin. "This time I'm staying." And then from the same coat pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Now the ring. Simple, elegant, with a tiny sapphire in the center, the color of her apron the night they met. "I don't want a big ceremony," he said, "or headlines or speeches." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "I just want forever. With you." In flour and salt and sunrises. A pause. "And if you say yes, we can start forever right now." She didn't cry, she just nodded. "Yes," and kissed him under the stars. Because love, when real, doesn't need to rush. It just needs to stay. The mornings at the coast were different now. The sound of the ocean had become their alarm clock, more reliable than any phone. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon before the sun fully rose, and the clinking of coffee cups had turned into a rhythm, one they both knew by heart. La Dolce Vita had been open for 3 weeks. And every day, without fail, the bakery line began forming before the chairs were even set out. Logan would unlock the front door with one hand and carry a tray of fresh scones with the other. Isabella would already be at the counter, her hair up, sleeves rolled, humming under her breath as she stirred the morning's batter. They had found their rhythm, but the hotel still needed more. 4 more rooms to finish, Logan said one morning, studying the renovation plans over his third cup of coffee. "Let's just finish one properly," Isabella replied, stretching her back and glancing at the worn blueprint spread across the counter. "We keep skipping between projects, and the plumbing in room 3 sounds like a dying raccoon." He laughed, rubbing his eyes. "Noted. Room 3, plumbing. Raccoon. Also," she added, biting into a leftover brioche, "we need better signs at the road entrance. Guests are getting lost." "I thought the smell of sugar would guide them in." "Not everyone follows their nose like you do," he grinned. True. The way they spoke, half teasing, half strategic, had become its own language. They disagreed often. Isabella liked hand-painted signs. Logan preferred clean typography. She wanted hanging plants, he wanted lanterns. But they met in the middle more times than not, because now, everything they touched, they built together. The bakery had become the heart of the space, but the hotel was becoming its soul. They decided on a theme: warmth over luxury, stories over aesthetics. A place that felt like someone had been waiting for you all along. Each room had a name instead of a number. The garden room, the library room, the sea glass room, and one room still unfinished, left intentionally so. The room where they planned to host writing retreats and cooking classes, small community gatherings, maybe even weddings. Not lavish, not branded, just real. "I want people to feel like they belong here," Isabella said one evening, sitting on the porch as twilight dipped the sky in lavender. "They already do," Logan replied, handing her a cup of tea. "You made that happen." She looked at him, warmth softening her features. "No, we did." He watched her sip, the quiet in her eyes deeper than contentment. It was peace, and it humbled him every time. Later that night, she found him in room 4 installing light fixtures with sleeves rolled up and sawdust on his face. "You never sit still," she said from the doorway. He looked up, grinning. "You love that about me." "I do," she admitted, stepping closer. She sat on the edge of the unfinished bed frame and studied him as he worked. "I've been thinking," she said softly. He raised a brow. Dangerous, she smiled. About what we're doing here. This place, the bakery, the hotel. It's more than a business, he nodded. It's home. Yes, she whispered. But it could be something else too. He paused, giving her his full attention. She took a breath. I want to start a program for girls who grew up like I did, who never saw someone believe in them. I want to teach them to bake, to manage money, to create something of their own. Logan blinked. You want to mentor them here? Why not? She said. We have the space. And the kitchen is the one place where I learned to trust myself. His heart swelled. I think it's perfect. You do? He stood, crossed the room, and cupped her face gently. I think it's the best idea anyone's had in this house. She leaned into his hand. You'd support that? She asked, eyes searching his. I'd build it brick by brick if you asked me to. She smiled. No bricks, just ovens. They laughed quietly, but the moment lingered, because in that instant, they both understood. This wasn't just a shared home or a shared business. It was a shared mission. They called it the Rise Project, a play on rising dough and rising potential. Within a month, they had 5 girls enrolled. Each came from different stories, foster care, shelters, generational poverty. But each entered the bakery kitchen with wide eyes and cautious hearts. Isabella taught them gently how to measure with intuition, how to knead with intention, how to breathe even when life burns the edges of what you're trying to build. Logan handled the logistics, built shelves, installed lockers, made spreadsheets, but the real work happened between the silences, in the laughter when a cake deflated, in the celebration when someone baked their first perfect loaf, in the quiet hug one girl gave Isabella after class, whispering, "This is the first time I feel good at something." It made everything worth it, every doubt, every scar, every risk. One evening, after all the girls had gone home and the bakery lights were dimmed, Logan and Isabella sat on the kitchen floor, backs against the oven, tired and covered in flour. "This is the happiest exhaustion I've ever felt," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too." He wrapped his arm around her. They sat there in the quiet hum of cooling metal, the smell of sugar still thick in the air. And then she whispered, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't paid for your bus that night?" He looked down at her. "Every day." She smiled. "Me too." They stayed there long after the moon had risen. 2 people who once came from different worlds, now building one that felt like it had always been waiting for them. It started with a leak, a soft, steady drip from the ceiling of room 2 that Logan tried to ignore for a day. Then 2, until it turned into a full-blown water stain, dark and ugly, spreading across the freshly painted ceiling like a bruise they hadn't seen coming. "I'll fix it," Logan said, already climbing up with a flashlight and a toolbox. But the damage was worse than he expected. The roof over that wing hadn't been properly sealed during the last storm. Moisture had seeped into the beams. A contractor they trusted confirmed it. They'd need partial replacement. Costly, time-consuming, a delay. And that was only the beginning. The permits for the bakery expansion took longer than expected. A shipment of kitchen equipment got delayed at the port. Then, one of the girls from the Rise Project had to drop out due to a family emergency, leaving a weight in Isabella's chest that she carried quietly, not wanting to make it about herself. Money tightened. Stress thickened. They began skipping meals, skipping sleep, snapping at each other over little things, missing screws, burnt loaves, invoices. "You ordered the wrong tiles again," Isabella said one evening, rubbing her temples. "I didn't," Logan muttered, frustrated. "They sent the wrong batch, again." "Well, you didn't double-check, and you didn't call the contractor like you said you would." Silence, regret. She closed her eyes, then softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "I know." He sighed. "Me too." They stood there between half-hung curtains and unopened boxes, both too exhausted to argue and too proud to cry. Later that night, they sat on the floor of room 1, surrounded by receipts and open laptops, the moonlight casting pale lines through the dusty windows. "We bit off more than we could chew," Logan whispered. Isabella didn't answer at first. Then, "Maybe." He looked at her. "Do you regret it?" She met his eyes. Not a single moment. Even in the mess, even in the fatigue, there was clarity, because what they were building was more than walls and recipes. It was identity, resilience, a mirror of everything they had overcome. But resilience needed maintenance, and so they made a plan. They pushed the hotel's full opening by 6 weeks. They cancelled one of their more ambitious renovation projects and redirected funds to the roof and plumbing repairs. They held a night of bread and music at the bakery, offering pastries and live acoustic music in exchange for small donations toward their community initiative. The entire town showed up. They laughed again, they rested, and then they rebuilt. One morning, as Isabella kneaded dough in the early hours before sunrise, she looked up and saw Logan at the counter, staring at a blank sheet of paper. "What's that?" she asked. He looked at her with a boyish smile. "A list." "Of what?" "Everything we've already survived." She blinked. "Is that going to be a book?" "No," he said. "It's going to be a reminder." He read aloud the first few lines. 1 broken pipe, 2 cancelled reservations, a storm that flooded the back stairs, a burnt batch of croissants, 1 almost broken heart, 1 very much still beating. She laughed. He continued. A speech gone wrong, a letter gone right, a house rebuilt, a trust re-earned, a promise kept, a future forming. She crossed the room and sat beside him, dough on her hands. "Add 1 more, she said. "What?" She took his pen and scribbled at the bottom. A love that didn't quit. As the weeks passed, things slowly began to stabilize. The roof was repaired. The bakery earned enough to cover the next round of renovations. Their first guest returned for a second visit, leaving a handwritten note. "This place healed something I didn't know was broken." The Rise project expanded. New applications arrived from nearby towns. One of the girls made her first solo batch of sourdough and cried in Isabella's arms when it came out golden and perfect. Logan, meanwhile, began mentoring a young man interested in hospitality who had never seen the inside of a hotel before. "You don't have to wear a suit to be a leader," Logan told him one day. "You just have to show up and care." The boy nodded, wide-eyed. That night, Isabella found Logan alone in the storage room, labeling coffee jars. "You never stop," she whispered, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, tired and happy. "Neither do you." She crossed the room and kissed him softly. "You were right," she said. "We bit off more than we could chew." "But?" She smiled. "Turns out we've got bigger mouths than we thought." They both laughed and kissed again. Because love that survives hardship doesn't just grow stronger, it grows deeper. Rooted in the things no one else sees, late nights, shared failures, unspoken forgiveness, and the quiet decision to keep going, together. The morning sun broke gently over the coastline, pouring gold through the windows of the new guest lounge. The scent of vanilla, warm bread, and sea air curled softly around the space, and everything in the house seemed to breathe with quiet purpose. Logan stood barefoot near the window, watching the guests wake slowly over steaming coffee mugs and folded blankets. The ocean shimmered behind them like a memory too perfect to describe. It was opening day, the official one. After all the delays, repairs, doubts, and detours, the boutique hotel was finally complete. And it was beautiful. Not in the way that magazines or designers defined, but in the way people felt the moment they stepped inside. Warm light, natural textures, stories hidden in every room, a front desk with handwritten notes from past guests, a corner bookshelf where people left paperbacks and letters, a bakery at the heart of it all, alive before dawn with soft laughter and powdered sugar. Isabella was already downstairs, her apron dusted, her hair tucked into a loose braid. She was piping cream into pastries, while Tanya brewed the first batch of espresso. The girls from the Rise project buzzed around, laughing, mixing, correcting one another's posture. It was real, all of it. Logan turned and looked at the folder resting on the front desk. Reservations for the next 2 months, bookings from guests who had heard about the bakery through friends or the hotel through stories online. Some just needed rest. Some were seeking something quieter. They were coming here not because of luxury, but because of meaning. And in every brick, every curtain, every imperfect but carefully chosen detail, Logan and Isabella had placed that meaning. He walked slowly into the kitchen. She saw him, and smiled with her eyes before her lips. "Hey you," she said. "Hey you," he echoed. "You nervous?" He leaned against the counter. "Only about the things I can't control." She arched an eyebrow. "Like the power going out, someone's kid breaking the glass lamp, you deciding you want to run away to Italy with a chocolatier." She laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Tempting." He leaned in and whispered, "I'd come find you." "I know." Their foreheads touched. The bell above the front door chimed softly. Guests had arrived. She pulled back. "Go do your charming thing." He kissed her cheek. "Only because it's for us." That day passed like a dream. Guests lingered longer than expected at breakfast. One family took photos in the courtyard. A retired woman left a note at the counter that simply read, "This house healed something I didn't have words for." The girls from the Rise project wore their new aprons proudly. Isabella let them lead. Logan fixed a loose hinge on the front gate before dinner service. And when the sun began to sink behind the water, turning everything soft and golden, he slipped away quietly, walking to the edge of the cliff where the stones curved around a private little cove. It was the same place he'd gone the day he called her. The day he said, "I found it." Now he stood there again. Only this time he had everything. And he wanted to ask her one more question. He found her later that night on the rooftop deck, where they sometimes sat with tea when the guests were asleep. She was wrapped in a blanket, hair messy from the wind, a warm mug in her hands. She looked up. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. Then slowly he pulled a folded napkin from his coat pocket. She laughed quietly. Again, he opened it. Inside, in his handwriting, "Will you build every tomorrow with me?" She looked at him, and there it was in his eyes, not just love but humility, courage, patience. The man who had once stood helpless on a bus now stood full of a future he wanted to share. He pulled a small wooden box from his coat. Inside, a simple gold ring with a delicate wave carved into the metal. She blinked. He didn't kneel, he didn't give a speech, he just whispered, "Isabella, marry me." She didn't cry, she just nodded and said, "Yes," then added softly, "But only if we still wake up every day and choose this." He smiled. "Always." They married 2 months later, barefoot on the beach, with their guests standing in a semicircle, waves crashing behind them. No orchestra, no press, just flowers in her hair, sand between their toes, and promises spoken like prayers. Isabella wore a dress she designed herself, simple, flowing, with a ribbon around her waist the color of sea foam. Logan wore linen. Tanya cried. The girls from the Rise project baked the cake. Their vows were written on napkins, folded and passed like secrets between soulmates. "I came to you as a stranger," he read, "and you gave me shelter in your world. Now I give you mine." She read next. "You were lost when I found you, and I was tired of giving, but somehow we gave each other back to ourselves." And when they kissed, the ocean roared behind them like a blessing. That night, they danced barefoot under string lights, surrounded by laughter and lanterns. But it wasn't the party that made it unforgettable. It was the feeling that everything they had built, every bruise, every repair, every whisper of fear, and every loud choice to stay, had brought them here. Not to a fairy tale, but to a life, their life, together. She never expected to be seen or wanted, let alone chosen. But when she paid a stranger's bus fare with the last coins she had, fate gave her something no money could ever buy. A love built brick by brick, made of daily choices, not empty promises. And maybe the greatest miracle of all began with a simple act of kindness. Because sometimes the smallest gestures change everything. If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your support is what keeps these stories alive, one soul at a time.